solo as we come upon the news that from Trump that Iran and the U.S. have reached a peace deal and the Strait of Hormuz are open, but are they? We'll look at the announcement and what's in the deal, and we'll kind of give some analysis building upon what we talked about last week, where that Leviathan spirit is trying to pull people, but then more so looking at Trump here in this deal. But I want to look at it in a different way and kind of add in some analysis that I've seen through the weeks building up into this moment. So stay with us as we walk through this deal, talk about what's being said, what's not being said, and then also the ramifications as we go forward on the economy and the coming elections within the midterm. So stay with us today as we dive into this and much more on today's Pipeline Report. All right, welcome everyone. I see many from around the country here in Shreveport locally, but Arizona, Cincinnati, and then thank you for those who are watching on Rumble, Facebook, and our YouTube channel. This is an exciting time to be intercessors and prayer, people who pray on the wall. Yesterday, you saw the UFC 250 event go off at the White House. Many new things have happened there in Washington, D.C. with the reflection pool being put back together and cleaned up, and the pool's actually reflecting. But today we want to kind of dive into building off of what we've been talking about the last few months, and I really want to focus in on just this one topic today of what Trump has announced as the quote-unquote Iran peace deal with the U.S., what that means, and is it really true? We're seeing that if you're paying attention to the stock markets last night, they just soared because if this deal is true, quote unquote, then oil prices will go back down, inflation will go back down, everything will go back down. Now, it'll still take time, and the stock market's going to do some waves over the next couple of weeks as, let's say, we're operating on the assumption that the deal does go through. It's going to take them a while to bring back production to the level where it can really show benefits in the oil markets, not only here in the United States, but around the world, for gas prices to start going back down. But what we do know is that President Trump is announcing that, hey, this deal is done. I'm going to pull this up. This is from his Truth Social the other day, where he said, hey, this is what the deal is. And he said, the deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran is now complete. Congratulations to all. And I hereby fully authorize the toll-free opening of the Strait of Hormuz and simultaneously here within authorize the immediate removal of the United States naval blockade. Ships of the world, start your engines, let the oil flow. So, per President Trump, this is where the deal has been made. I want to show a clip from Pete Hegseth when he was on Face the Nation yesterday, because he gives an interesting perspective of how the administration will be following through on the deal that has been made. So let's hear him and hear what he has to say.
That's why you have to deal with these folks with strength and not just ask them at the table. And it's the military strength that compelled them to this point where they're making a deal which will be great for the security of the United States of America. And that's why this is such a big moment. And only President Trump's strength and clarity of mission to say no nuclear weapon will ensure that now and underneath the MOU, the terms are set that are performance-based for Iran to ensure that they never get a nuclear weapon. That's what's critical.
So what he's talking about there, and I want to back up there. So Iran's calling this, Trump is calling this a peace deal. Iran is calling it a peace deal. But in reality, it is far from the truth. Both sides have an understanding that it is, quote, a memorandum of understanding. And I'm going to put this up because this is straight from an Iranian news source. I'll blow this up so you guys can see that. Where, let me do this one. Here we go. And then let me blow it up here real quick. Okay, it says the text of the Memorandum of Understanding will be published shortly, and the public will be able to see Iran's achievements and commitments per the Deputy Foreign Minister Kazim Garbabadi. And after the announcement that Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister said the immediate and permanent end of the war and military operations on multiple fronts, including Lebanon, will be announced starting tonight. And that including Lebanon is important. We'll come back to that. So we're seeing all this play out here where the administration and those are saying, and the reason I wanted to play Hegseth's talking points there is because he's saying, when asked, if any of this matters, because here's what is not being said, is that this is not this deal, if it were to go into place, would be something that is more so a 60-day pause period starting on June 19th, from what I can gather, as far as like when the term actually starts. Ceasefire in and around Iran, in Lebanon. And again, I said, we'll come back to that there, because it's very vital that we understand the significance of what is being said. And I want to go to this because this article here from Breitbart really lays this out here, where they're talking about the 60-day ceasefire period, because this really lays it out. It's not a deal. It's a memorandum of understanding, and the framework is a 60-day negotiating period which the U.S. and Iran officials expect to work toward a more comprehensive accord covering Iran's nuclear activities, highly enriched uranium stockpiles, sanctions, inspections, and regional security issues. So it does not mean that they have reached a full peace deal. So we got to kind of understand where he's trying to sell this deal. And if you understand what Trump's doing this week, then you'll understand why that's important. Because when you go over to The Hill and Wall Street Journal and everything, Trump's headed to a G7 summit where he's going to meet with other world leaders and talk about the potential of this deal and the effects of it. He's first scheduled to meet with French President Emmanuel Macron. So they're going over to France last night after the UFC spectacle on the White House lawn, and don't want to get into that. But the reality is, okay, this is happening where Trump is. And so now Trump's trying to sell, okay, this deal's been made. What are we going to do? What are we going to do moving forward? So now Trump is negotiating this. And the interesting part is obviously Israel. Now, you have a mixed bag of emotions here. There's good Trump, bad Trump. If you go off of what Trump says, this is a good deal. Okay, the strait's opened. You're able to eliminate the threat from Iran, where they are incapable of having nuclear weapons. They're going to remove nuclear weapons. And then if there is anything there, they're going to take everything out and never go forward in proceeding to produce nuclear weapons ever again. That's what Pete Hegseth's talking about. He says the military is going to verify. But herein lies reality and the truth. We have to see, and if you understand the negotiations with Iran, they're not going to let the United States come in there to actually do what President Trump is saying is going to be done, where the U.S. will verify through either military action or a third-party organization to verify whether there is nuclear weapons building grade activity going on or not. So Trump's selling this thing, and one of the key components that is barely mentioned in all of this, it's briefly mentioned in a, I'm trying to find the article, I was reading a lot this morning, where President Trump talks about how this is really an end to the Operation Epic Fury. And this is what's kind of not being talked about is domestically, in order for the United States to go forward with another attack, they have to show that Operation Epic Fury ended, because there's a 60-day time frame. And there's a dispute from military leaders and Democratic congressional and Senate leaders where they're saying, okay, you've passed this. This now comes in the realm of legislation to where we have to approve an act of war. And there's a whole big debate about whether the president has constitutional power or the power to send the military in and or not. And so what Trump's trying to do is say, wipe that off the table. This is my analysis on this, of what I'm seeing. And so now whether that's true or not is kind of still up in the air, but this is kind of one of the things that I'm seeing. If you remember back to the testimony that Secretary of State Marco Rubio gave a couple weeks ago, talked about how he says Operation Epic Fury is over. We've moved on. We're on to the next one. And so if this deal goes through per those negotiating from Pakistan talk about how there's going to be this deal that is made. There's an agreement that possibly on Friday, June 19th, I'll pull this up for you guys. This is what I'm reading off of from, if you remember his name, Shahbaz Sharif, talking about after intense discussions. The official signing ceremony will be on Friday, June 19th in Switzerland, and then goes into thank everybody. From what I understand and what I'm reading is basically it'll be proxies, deputy directors from Iran, and then Vice President J.D. Vance kind of as a signatory to show that this deal has been made and they're going to move forward and peace deal, etc., per what Trump says if you're reading pro-Trump sites. But then you get into the pro-Iranian sites. And I'm going to go through a list of 12 things that they're saying are in the deal per the Iranian side. Because remember, this is a memorandum of understanding. Nobody has seen the memorandum of understanding. President Trump and the White House are not releasing it. Neither are the Iranians, which begs the question of, has there been anything agreed upon? Or is this just Trump throwing it out there and the Iranians throwing it out there to say, okay, hey, we're reaching a deal, we're going forward. And then either side could say, well, depending on what's in the deal, even though nobody's seen the deal, though they're bad actors, they're bad faith actors. The question is, what was agreed upon? Because the reality is they're going through translators. So what is actually being said? And per President Trump is they're going to not produce nuclear weapons. That's his key thing, and open the Strait of Hormuz. That's what he's saying. The challenge is, though, this is the third group, pro-Trump in the Wall Street Journal, that he is negotiating with on this deal from the side of the Iranians. Because the big question that we've been talking about and everyone's been talking about and Trump has been talking about is who's leading Iran? Is it the elected government? Is it the Ayatollahs? Is it the IRGC? Or is it the military? And the Ayatollahs, I mean the religious sect. So that begs to be the question. This group seems to be the IRGC and the Ayatollah combination, which is probably what it really is, because we've talked about before how the Iranian president resigned, removed himself from negotiations, and the military itself has kind of segregated itself and stepped away, whereas the IRGC has seemed to be taking control of the military and then of the totality of these negotiations and the government. So you have Trump saying this is the third round of negotiators that they've gone through. This is a 60-day period of negotiations for them to then figure things out once they sign the deal on June 19th. And currently in its form, it is only a memorandum of understanding. It is not actually a peace deal that, as Trump is talking about, and more so that's trying to be twisted as. Because if you look at what Trump says, he even says, hey, look, we reached a deal. So let's just go forward. Let's move forward on what this deal, and just saying a deal is complete. Now, from the Iranian side, we looked at, and I want to come back to this, that Lebanon and Israel war will cease. Why is Iran getting involved or trying to have this deal be contingent upon Israel and Lebanon? To me, it's an easy carve out for the deal to fall apart. Because if Trump's saying, okay, you're not going to have nuclear weapons, and Iran saying, okay, you have to stop Israel from bombing Lebanon, even though recently Iran bombed Beirut, and specifically a specific site that was used to coordinate attacks and come up with attacks on northern Israel. And Israel said, okay, fine, we're going to take that out. After they were told to supposedly stand down from the president. Whether that's true or not is hearsay. A lot of these rumors of where Netanyahu and Israel are defying Trump are totally baseless and end up becoming false. But then there's no reporting and saying, okay, this is wrong. This is not true. This is reporting. This is just media going out and saying something. So that's item number one that Iran says is in the deal, that the Lebanon war with Israel will cease. Number two is that the U.S. is to forever promise to stay out of the internal workings of Iran and the IRGC and the Ayatollahs. Basically, the idea is you can't get involved in our governments because right now there's currently sanctions and they're trying to stop a lot of things. President Trump has negotiated through previous negotiations the survival and the prevention of beheadings and hangings of innocent, what he believes to be innocent civilians. So they want to say, okay, moving forward, you can't do any of that. That's part two of the deal. Part three is what Trump is wanting is a removal of the Navy blockade from the Iranian side, no tolls, no anything there. But in reality, that's what Trump wants. The Iranians want the Americans to remove their ships, and then they can control the Strait of Hormuz. Is that a deal breaker in and of itself? I think all of these are, really. If I lost, come back. Okay, there we go. We're back. The fourth is removal of forces from Iran's surrounding areas. So all the military bases that the United States has there in the Middle East, Iran saying, in order for us to agree to this deal, you're going to have to remove all those bases. What are we on? We're at 5. Open strait and arrangements determined by Iran. So they want not only the U.S. Navy blockade to be removed, but then ultimately they're going to be the ones to determine what happens there. Number 6 is suspension of sanctions on all the sales of future oil. Basically, the United States will not sanction moving forward, which is quite interesting in this. And then number 3 is require $300 billion for reconstructions of the sites that the U.S. and Israel have bombed. What are those sites? Those are military sites, nuclear sites where they built nuclear weapons. They want us to pay to reconstruct that. Per Pete Hegseth here in this video, he's saying, that's not going to happen. Number 8, removal of U.S. sanctions on the economy to free up all the money that has been locked up from their banking system that has really harmed them. Victor Davis Hanson talks about it's upwards of $430-something million a day that they're losing because of sanctions and oil embargoes that are preventing the sale of their oil, and in a totality of an estimate of what's happening. Line item number 9 from the Iranian side is a promise to not build nuclear weapons moving forward. We're going to promise via the proliferations agreement from the 1970s that we're going to promise that we're not going to do this, even though under the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal from Obama, they were doing that anyway. So they're going to promise to do that yet again. Number 10, basically that the United States can now put no new military and or military assets in the region in Iran and or sanctions on Iran in and of itself. Then number 11, a release of $24 billion held up in sanctions. Now let's remember, Obama gave them $12 billion in pallets of cash. And they're saying, okay, give us 24, basically double that, and they want it immediately upon signing. Before we get to some of it, before we even get to the June 19th deadline or the agreement of where they're going to publicly sign this thing. Are you seeing how this deal might fall apart? 12, the last one that I want to talk about is that no negotiations of Iran will involve talking about how Iran supports Hezbollah and any other terrorist organization around the world. Basically, if you think that, I know somebody put in here how Hezbollah and Iran are the same. I don't disagree with that. But Iran saying, yeah, you can't bring that up. We're not going to talk about that. If you're going to get in this 60-day period where we talk about this, you can't bring that up. So basically what they're doing is both sides are trying to put all their cards on the table. And you can say, well, President Trump's being deceived. That's where I think we need to pray. You know, we talked about last week this Leviathan spirit trying to pull him down. I think we talked about how President Trump is susceptible, just like, say, King Nebuchadnezzar or Cyrus, how pride can sometimes get in the way. And even in ourselves, we have to be mindful of this, of being humble enough to recognize, okay, where does the Lord need to come in? And so if you're looking at this in the perspective that President Trump just wants to get a deal done, he's going to do anything that he has to do to make a deal, that's something we need to pray for. But the reality is looking at this from a broader scope, is taking an even further aspect, is this is President Trump offering peace. Okay, hey, we're going to open up the strait. We're going to get back to making a deal. We're going to get freedom. We're going to make sure, he said this, make sure you stay alive. It's either peace or it's an imminent destruction of the structures that are blockading the freedom for the Iranian/Persian people in country. And so per what is not out there, because we're still waiting on the text even of the memorandum of understanding so we can analyze what the deal actually is. If we're going off of the reports from the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and everybody that's piecing it together from what's being leaked from really not even from the White House, but from the Iranian side of what the deal, and in Pakistan of what the deal might entail, this is a bad deal. And that's where we want to pray for President Trump to kind of understand this. And in reality, this is a negotiating tactic. He's going to use this, one, to end Operation Epic Fury publicly. He's going to see where Iran is at, and then also show, and this is the challenge here, because on the right, you're seeing this big, the far right, they're calling it, even though like Nick Fuentes and others, and Candace Owens have switched to saying, I'm Democrat now, or in some cases, I'm not even going to vote, which is quite interesting. But I beleaguer my point in the sense that President Trump here is in negotiating stage. He's trying to make a deal. The challenge is nothing's been signed. And then in and of itself, it's not really a deal. It's a memorandum of understanding to begin negotiations. This is the starting point of negotiations. And if what is being said is publicly is true, this is so we know who we're dealing with. Okay, per this third round of negotiators, this is what we're willing to negotiate with you. Trump's been very clear from the forefront. No nuclear weapons, period. Moving forward or ever for you. That's it. And open up the Strait of Hormuz. And then now you're seeing the list of the 12 things, at least the starting point of negotiations from Iran. They're saying it's a surrender of the U.S. We've won, trying to spin it, whether that's true or not. And then this is the key point. Because Trump has said, look, Israel can do what it needs to do. We're not in control of them. They're not in control of us. They need to figure out what's best for their country as we're going to figure out what's best for our country. And now President Trump's at G7. So there's immense pressure mounting for President Trump in these moments. Then you have the deal here where in the states and Congress where Speaker Johnson is trying to get a funding deal done, talking about how this next round will be a reconciliation 3.0. The challenge is look, there's a very limited majority. And again, this all builds up to the midterms. Trump, in a sense, has to turn, and this Trump administration has to turn the economy around. Because it's becoming, whether it is or isn't, in my opinion, it is, because the numbers are showing it, is that the economy is becoming hard on everyday Americans. And this is ultimately what won him the election in 2024 and could be his undoing, because remember, everyone was saying the Trump administration won this deal, this conflict with Iran. Oh, it's only going to last this week. The oil prices will go back down at the end of the week. We said, okay, they've said this, but they've said things like this before, and it hasn't been shown to be true. And the challenge for President Trump and his administration and those negotiating this deal is you keep putting these red lines out there. Okay, if you do this, we're gonna come after you. You do this, we're gonna end you. In total country and totality, basically, is what he's saying. But yet they keep pushing the red line back further and further and further. And Iran knows they kind of have some negotiating power in this. The challenge is who can wait the longest. This is a waiting game. It's a game of chicken. If you've ever played that growing up, of who's going to fold first. It's a poker game for President Trump. And in reality, like, our prayer is, okay, Lord, what should President Trump do? Should we get involved? Should we go forward? Pete Hegseth, I know, talks about being aggressive and, well, we're going to verify everything via the military. But we have to be careful not to get drawn into a war that could potentially be World War III level. So let's continue to pray for this administration and all those involved, as this is becoming very contentious, not only amongst the American people, but now you're involving Israel and what they think should be done and where things kind of fall apart. And if Israel keeps doing what it's doing, then Iran could say, hey, like, we're not willing to negotiate on that. And pretty much off of everything that Iran is saying is in this deal, it kind of tells me it will fall apart. And even from Trump's side, it will fall apart, because Trump's saying, okay, we agreed on everything. Well, if what's publicly out there is agreed upon, where you're saying no nuclear weapons, and they're like, well, you can't tell us that what we can or cannot build nuclear weapons, that's kind of a mute point, and that's a bad faith deal. That deal's not going to get nowhere. If it was a plane, it wouldn't get off the ground. So let's continue to pray for President Trump as he continues to try to negotiate this. He's at G7 summit right now, supposedly going to meet with Emmanuel Macron, president of France, today, as he meets with other world leaders and trying to turn the oil price debacle around, and the economy's surging for now. So we'll see if that continues. But let's continue to press forward, press into covering President Trump and those negotiating this. And we have our issues with some of them, as they've made some good deals and some bad deals before. And this is one of those things where, you know, good Trump, bad Trump, which one will we get today? Is if what Trump says is true, then the deal's good. If what Iran says is the deal is horrible. You know, he talked about the good, bad, and the ugly, and the reality is we got to try to come together in the and from the starting point, if what both sides are saying is the starting point, this is a non-starter and will go nowhere. All the hoopla for really nothing, and unfortunately, the world has to a degree has to pay the price. But the deeper question is this the fight for President Trump? Does he need to fight this battle to go in and prevent Iran from having nuclear weapons? Some say no, because they don't want any involvement. Some say now's the time to do it, because you don't know when you will ever get the chance to do it ever again. And then there's the push from Israel that has always been there of Iran's 6 months away from getting a nuclear weapon. The challenge is are they really? And then if you stay out of it, it keeps taking, 20 years, or have they been? And then, Israel does something, the United States does something and prevents them from moving forward. You never know. We'll never truly know until somebody goes in or some information is exposed from within Iran about where they're really at. Israel claims to have it at upwards of 60% enrichment. If that's true, then okay, something might possibly have to be done. And Trump has advocates on both sides trying to counsel him on what should be done from Israel and domestically here internally. And then you have the fallout here from Twitter sphere, X sphere, social media, etc., of everybody putting in their opinions. And what we want to say here today is look, we want the will of the Lord done right now for this country, for our president, and to a degree, there's some sovereignty for each nation that they're going to have to attest for, even Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as there's the threat of him possibly being recalled, the government falling apart, and losing his seat, somebody else being put in, as there continue to be attacks on him, as there are on President Trump. So let's continue on that point, praying there, as well. We have a short episode today, and we'll be back next week again, praying and staying on the news for what is happening in this country and the major points that we need to be praying for, what we believe praying for what the Lord is showing us. So blessings to each and every one of you. Continue to follow along on both Rumble, Facebook, and YouTube. And you can watch all our sermon replays and services on YouTube and Facebook and Rumble as well. So blessings, and I'll see you guys next week. Have a good one.